just in re-looking at even the trailer, I don't know how to leave it off.
I read that in Talk Like a Cinematographer magazine.
It's just gritty and guerrilla and no holds barred. It doesn't look like anything else, and you just didn't expect to see it.
Hey, welcome in, Fright Clubbers. This is the Fright Club Podcast, live from the home studio. And she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And we're from madwolf.com. And we're back talking about cinematography. We are not cinematographers, but it's the way. But you don't have to be. It's one of those situations where you don't have to know all the technical jargon and the ins and outs to know what looks fantastic.
Right. And I think one of the things, two of the things, actually, I think that go hand in hand in making any kind of a movie great, but particularly horror, I think, is sound design and cinematography.
Yes.
You know, and there are so many. When we started looking into how many there were that we should include, well, I'm just going to tell you, we're going to take a couple of detours. So we didn't exactly do fuzzy math. We still have 5. But embedded inside some of those, we're going to go off on a detour about some of the just remarkable work of cinematographers in horror films.
Yeah, the more I started looking into these and doing some research, we could easily do 2 podcasts on this because there are just so many. And I'm glad you mentioned sound design because that's more my area, and we've got to do that one of these days.
We really do. I should probably just let you pick.
Because actually there's one on this list that would definitely qualify, I think, for me for sound design because you're right, that's another area where, man, let's put it this way. As other people have said that I agree with, if you don't have great look and you don't have great sound, that can just torpedo a film so quickly.
Absolutely.
And so many of these are definitely great, not only in the sound department, but for sure in the cinematography department, and that's why we're going to talk about them. But first, we want to say thank you to our very special guest last time out. I hope you caught the podcast on Dark Ages Horror with director George Popoff. That was awesome that he agreed to come on.
It was super cool. We don't often have film directors. We have in the past. Usually we just let them off the hook. We're like, just stay, we'll talk about your movie, and then you can take off. He had done all the work. He had watched all the movies on the list and revisited the ones he had already seen. He'd never seen an Evil Dead movie before, so he watched all of the Evil Dead movies in preparation to just talk about one of them. And it was just really cool to hear his insights. I mean, to get a perspective for somebody who has made movies before, and very good ones. So if you haven't checked out Hex, which is the one that we talked about, or their new one, The Droving, you ought to. They're both very, very good.
Yes, The Droving, as we said, it has people in animal masks. So right away, that's a thumbs up on my end. But no, it was really great to hear not only his insight on making his own films, but he was really excited, I think genuinely so, to talk about these other movies. As he told us, he was more excited to talk about those than to talk about his own films.
Yeah, he did say that.
You know, that's a funny thing to say, but the more it went on, I think he might have meant it.
Yeah. Well, I think he's on kind of an engagement right now where he keeps talking about his own movies.
Right.
So I think he just was excited to get a chance to be a fan, and it was so cool to talk to him. He's very funny. He was really, really great guy. So that was awesome. And then today's podcast is actually the result of a poll.
Yeah.
And so Eyeballs came in second, which means that probably we'll be doing Eyeballs soon.
So even if you're a loser, you're a winner down the line.
Right.
Eyeballs.
Well, we have done that, though, so far. In all of our polls we've done, the number 2 has been a podcast that came up not long after.
Seems fine.
And since we were just talking about Lucio Fulci a minute ago, prepare yourself. You're going to be seeing. I don't think George is going to be a big fan of Lucio Fulci, is my guess. I mean, I know you've seen some, but I don't think you've ever seen like a block of them. So.
Right. Well, right now, off the top of my head, not one of my faves, but I'm open-minded.
He's definitely got a preoccupation with eye gouging, though.
All right. We'll see how that goes. We're getting ahead of ourselves, so Eyeballs down the line. But today's cinematography, and I can understand why it won a poll.
Yeah.
Because any movie fan almost has to be a fan of great cinematography.
Yeah.
So much it drives how successful a film can be, and it certainly comes through in all of the ones, not only on the list, but all the other ones, all the other detours that we're going to take. So with that in mind, should we just jump right in?
Let's.
Because we got a bunch to talk about. And I guess the one we'll start off with would be probably the classic of this bunch. It's from 1964, and it's a collection of 4 Japanese folk tales with supernatural themes. Kwaidan.
This is a movie, Yoshio Miyajima is the cinematographer of this movie, and it was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. And it's long. It's a little over 3 hours long. It tells 4 different folk tales that are kind of spooky. Some of them you'll recognize because they're very. It's clear that other films have taken from pieces of these. But I wanted at least one of the films in this list to be very stagey in the way that it's shot. So a film that was looking to do something that didn't look like real life. For all 4 of these, the majority of the stories are shot on sound stages. There might be 1 or 2 actual location shots, which are gorgeous as well. So it's the cinematographer as well as the set designer, and set decorator all working together to just create the most glorious look and very distinct looks for all 4 of these different shorts, the whole anthology.
Yeah, and the word Kwaidan can be translated to either spooky tale or ghost story. So that makes a lot of sense. And the 4 vignettes were chosen to represent the 4 seasons of the year. And did you mention the director?
I did not.
Director Masaki Kobayashi.
Yes.
If I pronounced that right. And he apparently trained first as a painter before beginning a career as a filmmaker. And that really comes through in this because some of those, like you mentioned, they're so stagey and so painterly. First of all, the colors jump out right away. But yes, how things are staged almost in looking like a painting.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that he trained as a filmmaker makes perfect sense. I'm sorry. The fact that he trained as a painter makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the things that I want to talk about outside of this are some of the other great filmmakers who were known for their cinematography, but who did things in a very stagey way. And so Mario Bava is one of just the most distinctive visually horror filmmakers you're ever going to find. And the one that reminds me the most of this, in a weird way, is Black Sabbath, because it's so clearly sound stages. But in a lot of his were, and they were so just phenomenal to look at. They just created an entire universe for you to see. I mean, he didn't try to do anything that looked authentic, and instead he created these spooky, just visual masterpieces. And you can't really, if you talk about Mario Bava, clearly I think you also have to talk about Dario Argento, whose films were never nearly as stagey looking, which is to say they don't look like they were built on a stage in the way that the other 2 did. But, he took the whole boldly colored giallo idea and just ran with it. And of course, his all-time, especially visually, especially in terms of set design and cinematography, is Suspiria. Yeah. That is just an incredible movie to look at.
It is. It's interesting, again, you mentioned stages and the staginess of this movie because in order to achieve the appropriate separation between the 4 parts of the film, the director Kobayashi filmed on 2 separate sound stages.
Oh, sure.
Had to do that, which again makes sense when you think about how he put it together. And I don't really know what this means, but he filmed, speaking of cinematography, he filmed in true Toho scope ratio of 2:35:1.
Okay. So. Brandon, are you on? Are you going to tell us what that means?
I read that in Talk Like a Cinematographer magazine. So I hope my homework was worthwhile. But yeah, it's all you got to do really is watch the trailer, and it'll suck you in.
It's true
because it just looks like it looks otherworldly.
Yes, it absolutely does. And then the third of the 4 shorts has a lot of animation, not active animation, still screen, cartoonish animation that you look at, and it's so. I think it's because by that time you're well into 2 hours into the film. By the time you start to see this flat animation, you're already sort of accustomed to almost that style of the film so far, is that it just feels so, it's such a perfect fit. And then the short that it kind of moves into is a lot more kind of garishly colorful than the earlier. It is an incredibly gorgeous film.
Yeah, and who doesn't like just a series of ghost stories?
That's right.
Creepy, cool-looking ghost stories. So that is number 5 on our top cinematography in horror, the classic from 1964, Kwaidan. And did you mention all the ones you wanted to mention in addition to that?
I did.
All right. Don't want to leave anything out.
No.
Because we are talking about a bunch of them. So moving up to number 4, this is, it seems like we've been talking about this movie on a bunch of podcasts lately, but that's okay. This is from 2009. A grieving couple retreat to their cabin in the woods, hoping to repair their broken hearts and troubled marriage. But nature takes its course. Things go from bad to worse. The cinematographer is Anthony Dodd Mantle on Antichrist.
You said you wanted to help me! Where are you? Nature is Satan's church.
The evil you talk about is an obsession.
No!
Did you want to kill me?
Not yet.
We have talked about this one a lot, and to a degree, I thought about not, because I'm going to talk about like a whole bunch of other cinematographers and films in this little section. This is kind of where I'm going to go off on a tangent. But, you know, just in re-looking at even the trailer, I don't know how to leave it off.
Oh.
The opening sequence really is poetry. It really is. And then the way that they change out the look of the film from the opening sequence to sort of the hospitalization and confinement at home sequence to once they're in the woods. I mean, it's like three separate films. Each segment has its own look, and the look of the segment feeds the atmosphere so tremendously.
Yeah. The opening, I remember seeing it for the first time, and of course the opening is so tragic.
It is.
But so beautiful at the same time. Not only how it looks, but the music that's playing, the aria that is playing, but both the prologue and the epilogue scenes in this were shot with a high-speed camera running between 600 and 1,000 frames per second, and then camera speeds were experimented with throughout the film, and not just within the shot, but within certain parts of the image, to create the distorted lack of logic, and it was meant to add disturbing qualities. And actually, the cinematographer, Anthony Dodd Mantle, was quoted as saying, "What you're seeing is slowed down so much that for the first time in the cinema, I had the sense of watching a film in a way that I look at a painting."
Oh, I can see that. I mean, it's incredibly painterly, especially some of the scenes in the woods.
Yeah,
of the trees, of the big tree with all the roots. Yeah, it has and it's interesting that it does have such this beautiful artistic look to it, because once it gets horrific, I mean, it's no holds barred. It is nasty.
Painful, you might say.
It is a nasty movie once it really gets unhinged there. So it's interesting to me to marry that with such a gorgeous, lush cinematography and visual feel.
But that's one of the things, not just in this film, the many things that come to mind when you think of director Lars von Trier.
Yeah.
The way it looks does always come to top of mind when I think of him.
Melancholia in particular.
Melancholia. And this film, apparently the producers wanted it to be in 3D. Can you imagine some of that in 3D, which von Trier scrapped? But yeah, for all his faults and his benefits, I always think with the von Trier film, it's going to look glorious.
Yes.
And this one certainly does, especially the opening and the epilogue. So I think you're right. How could you leave it off? It's just tremendous.
Well, here's going to be the challenge to everybody. Now I'm going to go through everything that could have been in this spot.
Okay.
Because what I was looking for this spot was the poetry of dread. How the cinematographer creates a dread that matches the specific horror of the film. And so if you take, for example, we've talked about this a lot of times, The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
And the way early on it's wide, and you see like all of these small people out in the desert, and then they move to the city and it's a little bit closer. So you see less of the, it's a little bit closer up on the individuals in the cityscapes or in the hospital scape. And then they move into the house and it's smaller and more cramped. And then they move into the bedroom and it's even shorter.
Yeah.
And, you're more and more sucked into the story,
and you feel cold
and trapped.
Yes.
And that was just masterful. And another one that I think the very first thing that I noticed when I watched the film The Reflecting Skin was Dick Pope's cinematography. The way that every scene, it looked very painterly, but every scene looks like this bucolic Idaho of the 1950s in a way that's also, there's something wrong here. The way that the cinematography and the director are able to capture not just this sort of wholesome, wheat field.
I was going to bring up the wheat fields.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But also that underneath there's something rotting here. And it's such a gorgeous movie. Yeah. It looks like nothing else.
Even though I don't like that movie as a whole as much as you do,
right.
I can't argue with you there. I mean, just the wheat fields alone, glorious.
Yeah. And another one that looks great, and it looks so much different than his other films, is A Tale of Two Sisters.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It was like and again, it's a marriage with set decoration because every frame is just saturated with these colors. But also, you're constantly looking just off frame, and it also happens in Rosemary's Baby. You're constantly, the way they set it up, so your eye is like, what's over there? What is just off the screen? Which I just think is such a fascinating and really effective device, particularly for horror.
Yeah.
That it's not just what's in your screen, it's what's not. What's in the frame, it's what's not in the frame. But the way in both of those films it is set up specifically to make you look around, like, what don't I see yet? Let's get over there. And then the other one, which I think does it even better, and it matches the film so much better, and I want to thank Phantom Dark Day for reminding me to add this to this, is It Follows.
Oh, yeah. Talk about looking at all corners of the screen.
Yes.
You betcha, because you're constantly looking. Who is it? Who is slowly walking toward us to kill us?
Right.
Yeah, that's very, thank you, Dark Dave. That would be one that we'd be sorry we left off if we didn't mention it.
Right, because the effect of this moving camera, especially in early enough scenes that the characters don't truly know what's going on yet, but we have figured it out. And so the characters aren't looking, but the camera is moving in circles around them, and we're looking. We're like, go back around. Who's closer? Who's closer? Who's still walking toward us? It is such an incredible use of cinematography to develop dread. Yeah, and another one, of course, nominated. Actually, it won the Oscar for Best Black and White Cinematography. Is Psycho.
Oh yeah.
The way, there are certain staged shots of the detective falling backwards, which put you in the mind of something like Jaws, of that incredibly oft-used shot, the pullback from Roy Scheider. But I also think that there's something in the way that they angle the shots to make Norman look wholesome, like a good guy, and then to make other people look more menacing, and then that shifts slightly. And again, it's another one where you're constantly like looking past him to see what's going on.
And then how they use the taxidermy in the offices, that's creepy.
Oh, absolutely.
And light and shadow, yeah, for sure. Psycho is another classic example.
The Shining. Just that scene of the little yellow bug, driving up the mountain and through the mountain, and it's got this sense of being happy. Oh, this is a happy thing. At the same time, it's got this sense of a toy that's gonna, just gonna go and be destroyed. And then, of course, it's echoed later with the big wheel on that carpeting. And again, I know I just keep saying it. The way set decoration plays into the way it's filmed, especially in this movie, is just insane.
By the way, since we're talking about The Shining, we just got Disney Plus, okay? And what's the first thing we watched on Disney Plus? The Simpsons, The Shining.
That's right.
One of the greatest things ever to air on TV.
You want to tell them, why did we get Disney Plus, George?
We got Disney Plus. It was to see Artemis Fowl.
That's not really true. That's a lie.
It was because of Hamilton, which is coming out on July 3rd on Disney Plus. There, I said it, and I'm not ashamed. Fantastic. All right.
So the last one that I want to bring up, because it was the one. This is the one that was going to make the list, and in the end, I swapped it out only because it's just not horror. The Handmaiden.
The Handmaiden. Yeah. Good Lord, what a gorgeous looking film.
Yeah.
I understand the argument between horror and not horror.
Yeah.
I would still definitely call it a genre film.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's horror, but my Lord, does it look just glorious.
I remember we were really quite shocked it did not get nominated for cinematography.
Yeah, more than shocked.
Yeah. It's a gorgeous movie. Everything Chandler Park does, honestly, every single one. Old Boy, for what it is, it's still, that cinematography is spectacular. Stoker looks great. Thirst, everything he does, and he often works with the same person, Chung Wan Chung. It just does. It always looks amazing. But I think that the top of their game was Handmaiden. It was just this fluid, gorgeous, mysterious sensual kind of an experience, and it was just a glorious movie.
Yeah, tough call. Tough call. There's a lot of great ones in there.
I know.
But Antichrist #4. By the way, welcome to everybody watching on Vimeo. Thank you to our base command, Serenity and Grace, taking care of things. And also, we should be live on the Gateway Film Center Facebook page. So if you're checking us out on there, thank you very much, and welcome, Fright Clubbers. Always appreciate that. And we move up to number 3, and I have to stand corrected because I thought our first film, Qui-Gon, was our classic. No, I forgot about this one, and how could I? This is from 1922. Vampire Count Orlok expresses interest in a new residence and real estate agent Hutter's wife, Nosferatu. This actually is listed, from what I found, as, well, the cinematographer, Fritz Arno Wagner, and then another name uncredited, Gunther Krampf, which is a great German name.
It's a great German name.
So the two of them together, and this has an unmistakable look.
Yeah, it does. This was another one. I wanted to make sure that I included something that went back in time so that we were, really paying attention to where we came from and what astonishing things they could accomplish, in the very, very early days of cinema. And so I considered Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, but that, to be honest with you, that to me is far more set direction than it is cinematography. It's a glorious looking movie.
It is, yeah.
I've got to say, I think that has a lot more to do with the way the sets are created to give you that sort of off-kilter, black and white, bold strokes kind of a look. And then the other one I really considered was Vampire, which is another one that's stunning black and white and very atmospheric and very poetic looking. But I went with Nosferatu because I love it the most. And also because I think that along with Max Schreck's unbelievable performance, I think that Murnau was able to create a very different kind of vampire atmosphere with him. I mean, it wasn't. It's a very early vampire adaptation, but it wasn't the seductive Count that we would eventually become very used to. Mm-hmm. It was much more like a naked mole rat, a pestilence, a plague, and I thought that was kind of fascinating. And also, some of the cool tricks of him standing up really quickly, or of the creeping shadow up the steps, like the most iconic images from the film are part of the reason why it was so groundbreaking at the time, because people at that time did not understand what they were seeing. They were slain by what it looked like, and I think that it stands up still today. I mean, it's still one of my very favorite movies.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of great comments in the live chat. Thank you so much for that. Brandon says, I love the use of shadow in this movie. Exactly. You can't talk about the look of this movie without the light and shadow. So much of it is shot in low key, which helps the creepy mood. And then Count Orlok is often shot in high contrast. Of course, that shows off his pale and his creepy look. And then you throw in what Murnau was doing with the arches and the doorways and the gates to frame the characters. And even if it's in black and white, it still manages to convey such a mood with light and shadow and angle. It is amazing. It's almost like you totally forget that there's even any use for color. It's
absolutely.
And it's part of sort of hand in hand. I'm sure you could say it was hand in hand with the German Expressionist movement at the time. But yeah, what he was able to convey just with light and shadow, as Brandon says, is amazing. And Steven says, the shot over Orlok on the deck of the ship haunts my nightmares. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. A combination of set design and lighting.
And not only that, that's a great shot for perspective and just angle, because it's the one shot in the film where you're looking right up, like up at him. He's just so creepy. He's just so menacing. And then the other thing that I love about, we had this conversation at a Fright Club Live one time. None of us, I'm looking at you out there as well, we're not big fans of Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. I get it. Neither are we. But I loved his use of shadow. I mean, everybody does. The way he used shadows, particularly with Dracula back when he was sort of the old lady Dracula back in Transylvania. But that always made me think of the way Murnau used shadow to announce the menace of his vampire. And I felt like it was clearly an ode. It was clearly a throwback to that. But I think that just speaks to, how clever that was when he did it in 1922. Oh my God.
Yeah. And also, if you notice throughout the movie, he doesn't use much camera movement. The shots are all fairly simple, with most being full shots. There's some looking out windows and things like there's some high angle shots, low angle shots, but not a whole lot of camera movement,
right?
Which almost adds to the creepiness of it. Like you can't get away.
Yeah,
that there's no movement. You are caught there and sort of transfixed in his in his grip,
yes.
and you can't get away.
I like that.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, for 1922 to craft something that holds up even to today is just astonishing.
It is, yeah. I mean, this is still my all-time favorite vampire movie.
1922, Nosferatu. That is number 3 on our list. Was there any more underneath that heading you wanted to mention?
No, because I shoved them all under the last one.
Okay. Get out of the way. But that's a great one. And moving up to number 2. This is the one that I said could also definitely qualify right off the top of my head for a sound design mention as well.
Yes.
This is from just last year. It's the story of 2 lighthouse keepers.
Wickies.
What? Trying to maintain their sanity while living on a remote and mysterious New England island in the 1890s. The cinematographer, Jaron Blaschke in The Lighthouse.
Watch us be your beast.
How long have we been on this rock? 5 weeks? 2 days? Help me to recollect.
Oscar-nominated cinematographer.
Oh, and well deserved.
Yes.
That's one I couldn't believe that he didn't win.
Yeah.
Because this, I mean, I remember when we saw it right away, the first thing we talked about was the ratio. Well, the foghorn. Can't get away from that foghorn.
You're right, the ratio.
We talked about the aspect ratio, and right away, I think after the movie, we were discussing it and what we thought this man or that man. And I remember I said I thought it had to do with the claustrophobia, the confinement, and you said, well, of course, it's Eggers, so it has to do with the time period. And it turns out we were both right.
Woohoo!
Because, of course, he was very, very insistent on using the types of cameras and the types of shots that were around at that time. And he probably built them by hand. But as they actually built the lighthouse. But it's also done to convey the confined spaces that they were in. So, but man, it works, and black and white again is perfect for this movie.
It is,
and it's such a mood along with the sound design and yes, the foghorn that makes this movie just unforgettable.
Yeah, and the performances, obviously.
Well, yeah.
But at any time, and I go back to The Ring. Right, my favorite scene in The Ring, which is weird because there are so many great scenes in The Ring, but my favorite scene is when Naomi Watts is digging around Brian Cox's living room and trying to figure out what's going on. And what you can see, she's in the dark, you see the light from the lighthouse swing through the room and then leave, and then swing through the room and then leave. And then you're waiting to see Brian Cox show up in the room, and he does, and you're never going to expect him to do what he does when he does show up, but it's such an effective use of light in that. Well, and similarly, and to a much greater degree, the black and white, I think, of the lighthouse makes that beam of light so much more important. It's so much more vital to what's happening in the film. And then also the shadow and the lack of light.
Well, now we're going to get technical because these guys were so caught up in authenticity. They had a custom filter made so that no red light got through. It just discarded any red light, which means they said Caucasian skin gives off a lot of red light, and they didn't
want. Mine does.
They didn't want any of that to get through, and then it became much darker, so it amplified the variations within the red tone. And also they shot it on apparently double X stock black and white, and it required much more light to get exposure. So they had to pound so much more light into the set that sometimes it was almost blinding to Defoe and Pattinson in order to get this effect. So the lengths that these guys go to, I know, I know, and all the farting. I mean, gee whiz, no wonder they went insane. But the lengths that they went through to get this look, but it pays off.
Oh, it does
incredibly well. This looks like nothing else. It looks like you're transported not to another time, but almost to another world.
Yeah.
Yes, it's supposed to be New England, but it's also like much like the themes of the movie, it's some chapter in Greek mythology where it's not even on this planet.
Yeah,
it's so strange
It's a
looking.
descent into madness, and anytime you have a movie that is the point, a descent into madness, you have to match it with the look of the film. I mean, it can't just look like your run-of-the-mill ordinary film, and I think that this one really does that incredibly well. Like the polar opposite of this movie, but it is another film where I think the cinematography, as roughshod as it is the perfect match for the subject of the film, and that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's just gritty and guerrilla and no holds barred, and it doesn't look like anything else that came out in 1974, and you just didn't expect to see it, but it was such a yucky, perfect match for what you were watching on the screen.
And as we've mentioned many times, part of the horror there is that it is in broad daylight.
Exactly.
And which most people don't expect to have horrific things.
Yeah.
And they're expecting to be in the dark. Great comment from Nathan. He says, unbelievable use of sound. And that is so true. The sound design is impeccable. So it would not only land on a list about sound design, it would probably land on a list about best hair in horror. Really for Willem Dafoe alone. That's all his own. I remember when we interviewed years ago when the movie Semi-Pro came out, the one with Will Ferrell. We interviewed him, and everybody wanted to know that, yes, that was his own hair.
Yep.
And Willem Dafoe, it's an incredible do and a beard, and that really adds to the character. It adds to his craziness. But,
it does.
Yeah, but thank you, Nathan. Yeah, the sound in this, along with the look, is incredible. And it's one, I think, doing research, among all the films that we talked about here, I think doing the research for this one made me want to watch it again, now.
Let's. We'll see ya.
We'll see.
We'll tell you about number one some other day.
It's such a trip in all ways, trying to get inside the look of it, the meaning of it, and just live in it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And that's why, I'll be honest, this probably would be not my number one.
I know.
I think.
I know
it
that
really
it would.
It really would. But it's not. It's number 2 because what do I know on our list of cinematography in horror, and that takes us up to number 1, and this is from 2006. Although I do agree, this looks fantastic, and this is set in Spain of 1944. The bookish young stepdaughter of a sadistic army officer escapes into an eerie but captivating fantasy world, Pan's Labyrinth.
There will be a journey that will make you believe. In darkness, there can be light. In misery, there can be beauty. In death, there can be life. Pan's Labyrinth.
So great. So great. Guillermo Navarro has been the cinematographer for so many Guillermo del Toro films, including The Devil's Backbone and Kronos, and they all look great. I mean, and I feel like this is a director who really requires a cinematographer who understands his vision, because his vision is so unlike everybody else's. It's so mythical. It's so seeped in folklore and childhood dreams, and this one in particular. And for me, I know that it's not didn't win Best Picture, didn't even win Best Foreign Language Picture, but Pan's Labyrinth to me is Del Toro's high watermark. I think it's a nearly flawless film, and I think one of the things about the way it's shot is that it's so lush and beautiful that it doesn't necessarily feel like a tragedy or like a horror film, regardless of the fact that it is very definitely both, you know? And when you're in the cave with her before you see him put his hands up with the eyeballs on his hands. It captures the war. It captures the forest in a way that is it's that step between realism and fantasy, and Navarro captures that just perfectly.
Yeah, he does. And one of the ways he did that, here we go getting technical again. He shot a lot. They shot a lot of day for night, especially in the forest, and when it was very difficult to get the artificial light. And Navarro purposely kept the lighting effects that could only be attained with sunlight. And then when they did that, that ultimately jarred the image when it passed itself off as night, which created an aura of experimentation in the final image. So some of these things, these geniuses with their technical abilities, some of the things they can achieve by doing these experimental techniques, not only with cinematography, but with sound. And you get a look, just like you were saying, that is caught between a fantasy world and a reality world, which I think on this movie was such a necessity to achieve the mood that you wanted, because that's where this movie lived.
Oh, yeah.
As Ophelia was back and forth, it had to feel like you were stepping into a whole other world.
Yeah, and that you could equally believe that, it's that the reality is so unreal that it's equally unbelievable as the unreality is. And I think that that's one of the reasons that this film is so smart and is so touching, because it's not just that this little girl is seeing this and believing that it's true, but as an audience, you're not sure. Am I supposed to think this is really happening or it's not really happening? And he does a lot of similar themes in A Devil's Backbone. A lot of similar themes. But this one is so much more magical in that it's not a ghost story. It's a story about these fairies and monsters and woodland creatures, and it's so beautiful and also so sad.
Yeah. And this was originally supposed to be the middle film of a trilogy about the Spanish Civil War. Of course, The Devil's Backbone was the first, but as of right now, I don't think there are any plans for the third film.
Get on it.
He actually, Del Toro himself, because he no longer trusts translators after encountering problems with previous subtitled movies, he did all the English subtitles himself.
Wow.
To make sure they were right. Katie chimes in with, "I'll never look at a wine bottle the same again."
No. Yeah.
And really, the iconic image from this one is Doug Jones.
Yeah.
The
Pale Man.
Yeah, the Pale Man. And that's another case of contrasting color.
Yeah.
Because his pale skin and his pale appearance in the middle of all that other tableau is so striking.
It is.
Along with the hands for eyes.
Right. And of course, physically, he's such a perfect actor for so many Del Toro films.
He really is.
He's so gangly and yet so elegant and graceful. That is such an incredible character. So that's our number one.
Well, apparently the live chat loves that at number one. So I know there's some Lighthouse fans out there too. So was anything else underneath that heading?
No.
Just sitting there at the top.
Yeah, just sitting there at the top. I just wanted to talk about a few of Navarro's other films. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a great list. And as I said, it probably would have been easier to make this a double podcast. But this was fun talking about these. And I know we got a lot of ideas and a lot of great comments. So always keep those coming. We always like to keep the conversation going if we can. You can always find us on Twitter. We're at Fright Club Pod. Also on Facebook and on Instagram. We're at Mad Wolf Columbus, and the main website where you can find all of our written reviews, our other weekly podcast about all the new movies that come out. Called The Screening Room. That's all at madwolf.com. So we talked about this being the result of a poll, and number 2 that came in second to this was Eyeball. So that's coming up sometime
that will be
down the line, but not next.
Soon. No, the next one is actually one we've already recorded, and we want to thank writer-director Sam Kliesnik for joining us, and we covered grief. We talked about grief and horror, which may not sound like a good time, but I'm telling you, it is such a brilliant list of movies, and also, she is such a great guest.
Yeah.
She really brought a lot of insight to the conversation, and she has her first novella is out called True Crime. It's absolutely brilliant, and I promise you would love it. Because you're listening to this podcast, you're absolutely her target audience. So look it up. It's Samantha Kliesnik, True Crime.
And I also got the impression in talking to her for that podcast that she hadn't seen a lot of the movies. So she had, when we talked, she had just seen them.
Yeah.
So we were really getting some fresh perspective
Yeah.
on those. And a lot of them we had not seen for a while. So it was interesting to get that. You're just coming off it, and you're getting these these fresh ideas about it. So you're right. She brought a lot to it, and that was a lot of fun. So that is Grief. That's going to be our next Fright Club in the studio.
Correct.
Recording. So, and as of yet, we don't know if we're going to be lucky enough to be back in front of that live audience at the Gateway Film Center yet for our next Fright Club Live. We'll let you know. We hope so. We miss everybody there.
We do.
I know everybody misses seeing movies with the theater experience, especially at the Gateway, and we are chief among those fans. But we're only going to do it when it's safe and when it's right.
That's right.
So we will certainly let you know. In the meantime, hope everybody is safe. Hope everybody is healthy. Can't thank you enough for getting together with us tonight. Until next time, we really appreciate you stopping by, as we always do. And she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And this is the Fright Club Podcast. Should we do it together?
Yeah, let's.
Stay frightful, my friends. Harmony.